Okay, let's get started. It's 15 past 1 minute past 5 o'clock. Okay. Badram karnebihi shunyama devaha badram pashyema akshabihi ryajatraha sthirairangair tushtuam sastanubihi vyashema devahitai yadayuhu swastinah indro vrudrashravah swastinah pusha vishwavedaha swastinah tarksho arishtanemihi swastino bruhaspatir dadatu यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रशुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाबोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम् नारायणं गुणैः सर्वैरुदीर्णं दोषवर्जितं ज्ञेयं गम्यं गुरुंश्चापि नत्वा सूत्रार्थ उच्यते. So good evening everyone. Thanks for joining. So this is our fourth in series on Brahmasutra, and actually this is 24th in the series since March. So hats off to all of us. We have been continuously doing this every week for the past 24 weeks, except 1 week I missed. I had to drive down to London, but all other weeks we have done it. So congratulations to all of us, and it just demonstrates how we are all committed to try and know more about our Sanatana Dharma and also our Hindu religion and philosophy. So with the spirit of getting deep into the Brahma Sutras, Chitra, if you want to go to the next slide. So the last 4 weeks, we have spent a lot of time talking about two sutras. The very first sutra, Om Atato Brahma Jignasa Om, and Om Janmadhyasya Yataha Om. So we've spent a good 3 weeks talking about this. And as Vedavyasa has said in the Vedanta-sūtra himself, Avrittihi Asad Kruta Upadeshat. So revise again and again. No matter how many times you revise, the more you read, the more you learn, the more concepts, the more ideas you get. So revise again and again. There is no point in one's life that we can say that we know everything and we have learned everything and we have understood everything. Even Chaturmukha Brahma in Satyaloka is constantly studying the Vedas, and he is teaching the Vedas to his students, the jivas who are there in Satyaloka. So even if Chaturmukha Brahma can constantly engage in philosophical inquiry and revise again and again, tiny souls like us, we do need to carry on revising again and again. So with that spirit, I've requested Suresh Kankanwadi ji to take us through the last 3 weeks, the 3 lectures that we have done, to give us a summary so that we can then move on to the subsequent sections. So we're still going to sit on Janmadhyasya. So Suresh ji, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Madhu.
Do you want to come on to video, please?
I have switched on my video, Madhu. Hopefully.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll see. Yeah, carry on.
I can't see myself, so though, so I don't know what you're saying. So you'll have to let me know.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, thank you.
So Madhu, with your permission, then I'll try in the next 3 to 5 minutes to try and summarize what at least I have been able to understand over these series of lectures. If we could quickly move to the next slide. We started our journey by trying to understand the origin of Brahmasutra per se. It's on the next slide, Chitraji, please. Thank you. So what we understood is that these are composed by Vedavyasa. They form the foundational element of one of the Prasthanatrayas, and they contain knowledge about the Supreme Being. The construct of the Brahma Sutra per se is that it consists of 4 adhyayas. Each of the adhyayas are then further divided into padas into adhikaranas, and adhikaranas contain sutras. Each sutra per se has few meaningful words which have universal application, do not contain any unnecessary details, and are free from any flaws and doubts. Now, the pursuit of trying to understand such a science which is essentially experiential, needs utmost caution, mastery of grammar, and one needs to apply the complete contextual awareness to grasp what is being conveyed by the author, and therefore this being learnt in a teacher taught with an appropriate situation become necessary conditions in order to understand the essence of these sutras. So having laid this as the foundational element, we started exploring the sutras per se. On the next slide, please. We started, the topic was the science of Brahma. And the way I've tried to approach it, having spent most of my time in clinical medicine, is to use the framework of hypothesis testing. In that framework, we would say the subject of inquiry is should or should not inquiry into Brahma begin? And the hypothesis proposed by Badarayana here is that it should begin. And if we can formulate a null hypothesis to it and possible alternative hypothesis and are able to conclusively reject them, then we could accept the hypothesis proposed by the author. So the obvious null hypothesis to such a statement is that there is no proof that Brahma exists, and therefore there is no need for inquiry. And if at all Brahma does exist, there's no difference between Atma and Brahma, and therefore there is no need to inquire into Brahma as a distinct entity. Towards this, we touched upon elements such as total dependence of the jivas, the presence of ignorance. We talked about the role of divine grace, the entire Antaryami concept, and we referred to Purusha Sukta and said that as long as we can satisfy Anubandha Chatushtaya in its meaning, we should be able to reject the null hypothesis and accept the hypothesis proposed by the author, which is to say that then therefore inquiry into Brahman should begin. So having aligned that we should inquire into this topic of Brahman, the next sutra is around the topic of creation. And if we could please move to the next slide.
Before you move on, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt, could I ask friends to mute their phone, please? There is a bit of an echo coming through, so please give attention to your IT and mute, please. Sorry, yeah, carry on.
Yeah, thanks. So the next sutra, having established the context that inquiry into Brahman should begin, the next sutra is on the topic of creation. And before we go into the hypothesis, Madhu did explain very clearly as to how we understand what is this etc. in the sutra, creation, etc. The common understanding being just creation, sustenance, and dissolution. But if we need to take the complete context, then control, knowledge, ignorance, attachment, and liberation also become essential definitions contained within this etc., which comes after creation. So the hypothesis proposed by Badarayana here is that Brahman is the author of creation, etc., of the world of matter and jivas, which is what we're calling as universe. The null hypothesis to this perhaps then is creation is a myth. So there's no question of an author. If in the instance that creation actually did occur, Brahman is not the author if we understand Brahma as Nirvishesha, Nirguna, and Nishkriya. And if creation did occur and Brahma is not the author, the only alternative is that creation, etc., is a property of the world per se, and any attachment or any relation to Brahman is purely accidental. Towards this, we looked into the definition of Brahma. We looked and we understood Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahman as to what it means, the various cosmic activities of Brahma as have been elaborated all helped us refute these arguments. And couple of points were that it's such a wide, wonderful universe, which is so complex that anybody who created this should be supremely qualified and have infinite flawless characteristics. The other point we did touch upon was that should creation have been the property of the world per se, it's not serving any purpose. And what's the use of having an all-powerful Brahma who does not create? Based on these, we were able to quite justifiably refute the alternative hypothesis. And if we move to the next slide, please, we did conclude that this Jagat, the creation, was actually created by Brahma, and we accepted the hypothesis that Brahman is in fact the author of this creation. And the reason for us to do this is that the knowledge of the author is perhaps the only way towards liberation from this samsara. So that's the gist I have been able to capture. I stand to be corrected. Madhu, back to you, please.
Yeah, so Sureshji, that was not surprisingly a very comprehensive summary of what we have done over the past 3 weeks. So thank you very much. I'll call upon services certainly in the future. So thanks, Sureshji. So moving on to the next slide, Chitra. So we'll just catch up with where Sureshji left. So Janmadhyasya Yataha is the definition of Brahman. Yeah, he who is the creator of this universe, etc., is the definition of Brahman. And we also touched upon Brahma Vedapnoti Param Yad Tadesha Abhyukta Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Parame Vyoman. So that we touched upon that particular Upanishad saying in Taittiriya Upanishad, and we explored on Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, and then we confirmed that the Satyam in that word actually means all the eightfold dispensations of the universe that Brahman or Supreme or God does. So the Vishaya Vakya for this particular sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha, comes actually from Taittiriya Upanishad. And Taittiriya Upanishad, as you know, is part of the Krishna Yajurveda. So it goes like this: Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti, abhisamvishanti, tad vijijñāsasva, tad brahmeti. So that is the definition. So, this famous definition of the Supreme Being from Taittiriya Upanishad gives us the platform to explore what is it and how is it this Brahman actually creates this universe. Yeah. So I put those question marks there. What of the universe, who creates it, how he creates, where does he create, when does he create, and why on earth does he create this universe? So these are some of the 6, essential questions that any rational human being would want to challenge our Brahman as to why you bother creating and how do you create. Okay, so I've just highlighted how. So let's spend this session talking about how does this Brahman actually create this universe? What does that actually imply? What does it tell us? Besides the fact that it does mean that he has infinite auspicious attributes, but there are some very, very subtle points that we can grasp from this concept. So now, how does Brahman create? So the same Taittiriya Upanishad, and I put it on the right-hand side, it gives another beautiful statement in the second adhyaya. Ko hevanyat kaha pranyat yadesha akashaha anando nasyat. So, ko hevanyat kaha pranyat yadesha akashaha anando nasyat is the statement from Taittiriya Upanishad. It says, if this Brahman was not infinitely blissful, there is no way in which he would have created this universe. So that is a statement from Taittiriya Upanishad. He was not infinitely blissful and bliss himself, how he could not have created this universe. So from this creation of the universe, we understand that this Brahman is infinitely blissful. Now, why is that the case? So in that box on the right-hand side, I have first shown you Alvars. So some of you will be very familiar with the Alvars of southern India from the Visishta Advaita school. So these are the stalwarts. These are the proponents of the bhakti system of devotional service to the Supreme Being. And they composed a lot of works like Divya Prabandham and so on. So these are devotional works. And similarly, you just go up north towards Udupi and North Karnataka and south towards Karnataka. Then you had these great giants called Purandara Dasa, Kanakadasa, for example. They composed such wonderful music on Brahman. And these people, Alvars, the Dasa Sahitya, the Dasa Kutas as they are called, when they start singing about the Supreme Brahman, and when they are in ecstasy, and when they are in deep happiness, and they are in ecstatic mood, what are they doing? They are spontaneously dancing. Look at our friends in the ISKCON movement. When they do Hari Kirtan, when they do Hare Krishna Bhajan, what are they doing? In that great ecstasy, they are spontaneously dancing, they are moving their hands, and exactly like how the Dasakuta does, they just move their hands, they jump and so on, because they are in great ecstasy. Look at our friends, our youngsters these days. This is a very mundane example. Let's go to these clubs. Look at the parties. There is sound. People are very happy. What are they doing? They're spontaneously moving their hands and they're jumping and shaking their bodies. So they are in ecstasy. They are in blissful state. If you like, some amount of blissfulness or happiness. And when they are happy, spontaneously the body moves. And that is what the Taittiriya Upanishad is actually saying. This Brahman is like that, chaps. He is infinitely blissful and he spontaneously does this. So this creation of the universe is a spontaneous act of the Supreme Being. So it is not something that needs immense effort, but it is a spontaneous activity. Yeah. Can you please mute your audio, please? Whoever is talking, can they please mute the audio, please? There's a lot of background noise. Yeah. So there is this, he is infinitely blissful, and when he is infinitely blissful, spontaneous activity happens. Yeah. So that word, kohevanyat kaha pranyat yadesha akashaha anando nasyat, gives us a hint into the creative aspects of the universe, and why does Brahman create? Kamala, do you mind just switching, muting your audio, please?
Yeah.
Background noise. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So so that concept of akashaha anando nasyad gives us an indication of creatorship of Brahman. So note that word akasha that sits next to anandaha. Okay, kohevanyat kahapranyat yadesha akashaha anando nasyad. So now you should be asking that question, who is that akasha? We have just said in Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1, tat vijijñāsasva tad brahmeti. So it is the creator is Brahman, is what we have said. And immediately in Taittiriya Upanishad, the previous adhyaya, it seems to indicate that there is this some guy who's got a name called Akasha, and he is infinitely blissful, and he is the creator of this universe. Is this Akasha the same as Brahman? So that's the question that comes. So what Badarayana actually does for us is, he solves these kind of questions. And this is the primary purpose of Brahmasutra, is to kind of, solve these kind of doubts that we may have. So who is this Akasha is the next question. Now to understand who Akasha is, you need to jump to Chandogya Upanishad. Okay, and then come back to Brahmasutra. And this is the beauty of how you do scriptural studies. And as we said before, it's horizontal and it is also vertical analysis. So if you move to Chandogya Upanishad, and if you go to the first adhyaya, in the first adhyaya, it's a discussion about Udgita Vidya. It's a beautiful adhyaya in Chandogya Upanishad, talking about who this Akasha actually is. So it goes like this. So in that particular Upanishad, there are three types who are having this conversation. There is a guy called Shilaka, there is a guy called Dalbyaha, and there is a guy called Pravahana. So these three chaps are having a conversation. They have a deliberation between themselves. So they talk about who is the highest abode, who supports whom, and they keep talking about, the earth is supported by what, sky is supported by what, Swargaloka is supported by what, and they keep on having this conversation. And they come to a point where there is this question, Asya lokasya ka gatihi Akasha iti hovacha. Sarvani hava imani bhutani akashadeva sam utpadyante. Akasham pratyasyam yanta akasho hi eva ebhyo jayan. Akashaha parayanam. So that discussion comes about who this Akasha is. So essentially what it means is this Akasha, this person Akasha, is the final abode and the resting place of all that is created. So look at the beautiful words that come about. It says Akashad eva sam utpatyante. So it is from the Akasha this whole universe is created. Akasham pratyastam. That is a significant word. It is to this Akasha, this whole universe then goes back. Pratyastam is a very interesting word. Astam means astam gacchati. Astam means like sunset. Sunset is also called astam. So it just sunset, it goes away. It doesn't mean it disappears. It is just that we cannot see. So similarly, the jivas and all the jada, the prapancha goes back to this Akasha. Is what it says. It doesn't say it merges with the Akasha. It just says it goes back to the Akasha. Yeah, yet Akashad hi eva ebhyoyo jayan. Jayan means this Akasha is the highest. Okay, it says Akashaha parayanam. Para ayanam. Ayanam means the abode, the resting place. Para ayanam means the supreme resting abode place is this Akasha. So then we understand when we see this Chandogya Upanishad that Akasha is not the routine Akasha that we all know. Akasha means the sky. It is not that Akasha. This Chandogya Upanishad is actually talking something entirely different as to who this Akasha is. So we are confused. Who is this Akasha? Veda Vyasa comes to our rescue in the same Adhyaya. The first Adhyaya, he comes to a rescue in the first Pada and he says, Akashas tal lingat. Okay, so what the Veda Vyasa says is Akasha is Brahman himself. Akasha is another name of Brahman. Why? So, and we have been through this on so many occasions. So one of the basic mistakes we should never do when we read the Upanishads or the Vedas is just to see the superficial sense of the Sanskrit words. It's like any scientific investigation, we have to break open. I've told you this before. Chandas means chadayanti iti chandamsi. We have to open it and then try and understand what is the name, what is the meaning of the word Akasha. So the Akasha, you split it open. There are various ways of splitting it. Akashate iti Akasha. Kasha means prakasha. Prakasha means what? Bright, light, shining. Okay. So prakasha, that which is shining everywhere is Akasha. Our material sky does not shine. It is just an object. It is just there. So now we know Akasha means that which pervades everywhere but is a shining everywhere. There is another way of splitting it. Kam ashnati. Kam means ananda. Ashnati means that which is enjoying ananda. So here is a being that is everywhere and it is also infinitely blissful. Yeah, this is something which is it's light everywhere. Light is another meaning for jnana. So you instantly get that idea of jnana and ananda. So this being has got infinite jnana and ananda. Akasha, this is interesting. Akasha in Vedic philosophy, that is the material Akasha, there are two types. One is called Bhuta Akasha and the other one is called Avyakrita Akasha. Avyakrita Akasha this is a deep concept philosophy in Vedas about, you know about this Big Bang, the point of singularity. Now you could ask the question, where was the point of singularity? It has to exist in some space, isn't it? Before the material space comes about. So that space that is there eternally and it is endless is called Avyakrita Akasha. So that is Ananta. Ananta means infinite. So again, if you take that sense, this is a being who is infinitely Jnana Anandamaya. So that Akasha, then we understand, is this being who is infinitely blissful and he creates the universe. So this Chandogya Upanishad then goes on. So please do, if you find time and you're sufficiently enthused to go into Chandogya Upanishad, look at the Udgita Vidya there. So it celebrates the Supreme Being as Paro Variyan. Sa Esha Paro Variyan Udgitaha Sa Esha Anantaha Paro Variyo Hi Asya Bhavati. Parovariyasoha lokan jayati etam evam vidwan parovariyan sam udgitam upaste. So that's that particular verse there. So parayanam, so that parovariyan is such a beautiful word. Look how our philosophers think about the Supreme Being and how they celebrate the Supreme Being. Parovariyan means you have to break it open. So para, we all know para means he who is big. Paro means he who is bigger than that big thing. So Paro is even superior to Para. Then Paro Vara means something that is even big than the Paro. Then Paro Variyan means somebody who is bigger than Paro Vara. So he is the highest of the highest of the highest of the highest, is how the Chandogya Upanishad actually celebrates the Supreme Being who is Jnananandamaya, and because he is infinitely blissful, like Purandaradasa, Kanakadasa and Alvars and even our mundane party dancers who shake their body and do actions when they are in infinite bliss. Similarly, Brahman, when he is in infinite bliss, he just spontaneously creates the universe. So that's a very interesting angle with regards to why and how the Supreme creates the universe. Now, can we move on to the next slide, please? So now coming back, we need to now come back and re-gauge ourselves. So we know that in all of existence, we have three entities. We have Brahman, we have matter or Jada, and we have Jivas. And we have been through these three circles empty number of times. 1, 2, and 3. Srimad Bhagavatam, as we said, as we discussed last time, it says, Janmadhyasya yataha anvayad itarastasta artesha vignaha swarat tere brahma hridayadi kavaye muhyanti yam surayaha tejo vari murudam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo mrusha damnasvena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam parantine. Very first verse, but I'm just going to take the third line today. Tejo vari mrudam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo mrusha. So the trisargaha, we have dealt with this before. Trisargaha means three types of creation, that there are so many levels and depths in which Trisargaha can be understood. But let's take one interpretation there. Trisargaha means three types of creations. So Brahman has a type of creation, matter has a type of creation, and Jivas have a type of creation. So what is that? So that's a bit intriguing. So what is Brahman's creation? Sounds like a new concept. Brahman getting created, or what is that Brahman creation? So let's dwell in that particular concept in the next slide. Chitra. Now this is going to be a purely interactional. This is going to be an interactional slide, and I would be grateful if we all contribute to this, please. So I said creation, the creation of Brahman. What does creation for Brahman means? When I say that, we all know that he is uncreated. Ajaha, ajasya nabo avadyekam arpitam. So that's what Veda say. He is unborn. Okay, but for him, creation means him coming down in various forms, avataras. Those things are the type of creation that Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, they describe this in great detail. Okay, so I've got the first question here. We have dealt with this before, but I want volunteers. What are the Vyuha forms of Vishnu? We all know Vishnu is Brahman, and that we have established over the last several weeks. So now I'm going to jump directly into who is going to contribute here and say, what are the Vyuha forms of Vishnu? What does Vyuha mean, and what are the Vyuha forms of Vishnu? Any volunteers, please?
I don't know what Vyuha means, but is it Narayana, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, something beginning with S, and Vishnu.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you, Devan. That's good. Yeah. You got most of it. Anybody else? Please.
Sankarshana, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, thank you, Shilaji. So Vyuha means form. Vyuha means form. So there are 5 Vyuha forms of Vishnu: Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, Vasudeva, and Narayana. So these are forms of Vishnu. Okay, these are considered as Mula Rupas. These are the root forms of Vishnu. Okay. Now, next question is number 2 on the right hand side. Avatara. Okay. So what does Avatara mean, and how many avatars of Vishnu or Brahman that we are aware of? Who is going to answer that question?
Madhu, there are 10 avatars. Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Vamana, Nrsimha, Balarama, Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Kalki. Apart from this, there are many more avatars like, according to the situation, Lord takes up thousands of avatars, but we are familiar with these 10 avatars.
Yeah, wonderful, Padmaja. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to contribute there? Okay, so let's move on. So avatara means, what does the word avatara means? Avatara means literally means coming down. Okay, he comes down. He comes down on the material platform and the material plane and does some, acts, pastimes, acts, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Now, yes, how many avatars are there? Some say 10, some say 22, some say 23, some say 24 in the Puranas. And the Vedas say he's got infinite avatars as well. Okay. So the avatars, as he comes down, it depends on the context and the way you look at it. As Padmaja said, there are 10 main avatars that we are very familiar with. But if you go to Bhagavata Purana, for example, or if you go to other Puranas, there are 24 avatars of Vishnu that is described in that. And there are also infinite avatars. I'll come to that a little bit later. So thank you very much for the contribution. Next, let's move to number 3. Number 3 we have in, this is in Mandukya Upanishad, and we have discussed this before, I think very first when we spoke about the Upanishads and the metaphors in the Upanishads, we spoke about this. The names of the Supreme that controls 3 states of consciousness. Yeah, who's going to answer that? Or rather, can I have a volunteer, please? Any takers? No. Okay.
Waking, dream, deep sleep.
Yes, correct. So waking, dream, and deep sleep are the 3 states of consciousness. So what is the name of the Supreme who controls these 3 states of consciousness?
Om, Nada Brahman.
Okay. Okay, Om, but the Om controls this, yes, but there are 3 forms of that, A, U, and M. So that is Vishwa, Tejasa, and Prajna.
Yeah.
So Vishwa, Tejasa, and Prajna forms of the Supreme. So these are again Mula Rupas. Then you have the more popular versions: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Okay, so those are also the names or forms of the Supreme. Now in Rig Veda, in the 6th mandala, there is a very, very famous and important verse called Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya Indro Mayabhihi Purarupa Iyate Yuktahi Yasya Harayaha Shatadasha. That means there are infinite souls, and inside the infinite souls, this Antaryamin is sitting there in all these infinite souls. So in each soul, that Paramatma or Antaryamin who is sitting there is also an avatara of the Supreme. He is sitting there. So there are infinite jivas. So according to Rig Veda, there are actually infinite avatars of the Supreme in each and every jivas as Paramatman or Antaryamin. So when the Rig Veda says Shata and Dasha, Shatam means it's also, it's like Shata means infinite. Dasham also means infinite in the Vedas. So if there are infinite jivas and each jiva has a Paramatman sitting in who is unique to that particular jiva, then there are infinite avatars of Paramatman in each Atma. Okay, so that is our 5th question. Now 6th, Krishna. We are all very familiar with Krishna. So I'm going to put this for discussion on the table. So the Krishna or the Krishna avatar. So why is he called Krishna? What is the meaning of the name Krishna? Or how did Krishna, what is the Purana behind it? How did Krishna get his name? So you will know more about this than me. So if I could have some volunteer to tell me, how was Krishna given his name and what is the meaning of his name, please?
Krishna means transcendental and beautiful and transcendental.
Okay, thank you. That's a beautiful definition of Krishna, beautiful and transcendental. Yes. So does that mean Vishnu is not beautiful and transcendental? Does that mean Prajna form of Vishnu is not beautiful and transcendental? Is Rama not beautiful and transcendental? I'm just putting it on the table, but I like your definition. Thank you, Deva. Anybody else?
Madhuji, Suresh here, is it ability to attract, attract and actually post attraction burn the bad or the evil and provide solace? Is it in that direction?
Yeah, I think you're heading in the right direction, Suresh. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so let me just give you an understanding of what the Vedas say, what the Upanishads say, what the Puranas say about Krishna. So I'm going to put it on the table. Is the supreme being called Krishna just because he came on earth and had an avatara? Just when he had the avatara, was he given the name Krishna? No. So if you go back to the Puranas and see how Krishna got his name, so Gargacharya gives, there is a namakarana that happens. So Yashoda and Nandana, they organize an event to give name to Krishna. So at that time, people asked Gargacharya, who was the greatest sage at that time in that place, to give a name to Krishna. So Garga says, this fellow has infinite. So Garga looks at the baby, 3 months old baby, and says, this fellow has infinite names. What name am I going to give him? I have to only pick whatever name that he has got and just put it on so that people can use that name and call him. Oh, he looks very attractive, so I'll give him a name Krishna because it is one of his names. So that is how Krishna's name came about. It was not something that was discovered and put on to him. He already had that name Krishna and it was just picked up and Gargacharya gave that name. So what does that mean? What does that name Krishna actually mean? So as I said, the Krishna of the Vedas and the Upanishads, Chadayanti iti chandamsi, we have to break it open. Krishna, like any other word, needs to be break it open. So Devalji said most beautiful, very nice. Sureshji said attraction, excellent. So let's break it open. Krishna means Karshati iti Krishna. That which pulls and controls everything is called Krishna. Utkarshana iti Krishna. Utkarshana means that which pulls people upwards. So the more you go towards Krishna, the more he pulls you up towards liberation. Okay. Akarshana or Sankarshana. So he pulls and attracts and he is most beautiful. So he is very attractive. So Sankarshana, Akarshana also means Krishna. Now you can also break open Krishna as Krishi Na. Na means, there are two meanings for Na in Vedas. Na is a meaning for Ananda and Na is also a meaning for strength. Nakaro Balam, Aitare Aranyaka. Yeah. So Nakaro Balam, Nakara also means Ananda. Krishi means Krishi Shabda denotes what is called Bhuma or Puma or Purnatva. So this is Purnatva, infinitude. This is the one which is called Jnananandamaya. We come back to it again and again. Of Krishna actually means Jnananandamaya. So Krishi Na. Now Krishi means earth. Na means he comes down. So this guy came down as an avatara on earth. So that is also a meaning for Krishna. So what I'm trying to do here is, when you look at the word even Krishna, it is all etymological. It just indicates a particular attribute or the quality of the Supreme. We should never give that as a Rudi. And we discussed that last week, just as a name. No. It actually means a particular attribute. So when I say Krishna, I should be thinking about all these attributes of the Supreme. Okay. Now my question is, does Vishnu does not have this attribute? Does Narayana does not have attributes? Krishna is synonymous with Narayana. If you do the etymology of Narayana, it is exactly the same as Krishna. So it is very, very similar. So the seventh question that I have put there is there any difference in the various forms of the Lord? Does Vishnu's forms, various forms, are there any differences in that case? Is there a confusion here, or we all agree that there is no difference in the various forms of the Lord? I just wanted to gauge what the feeling is, what is the understanding here is. Any contributors? Is there a difference?
Madhu, Suresh again here. While the different avatars of the Lord by definition should not have any differences, but we do come across references, say in the instance of Balarama, or who's supposed to be an avatar but yet not a full avatar. So there is, at least in my mind, some confusion. While by definition there should be no differences in avatars, but there was the two other words you have put there, Avesha or those. How does one actually interpret? That's the confusion I have.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Suresh. I think yes, in the fullness of time, in the want of time, I could not go into Amsa, Avesha, and Vibhuti. So these are all some forms and his influence as he descends down. So Vibhuti, chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, you can all read about that, various Vibhutis of Vishnu, which is his Sreshta Sannidhana. So as a Paramatman, he is there next to all these jivas, and in those jivas, he has a special presence. That is what is called Vibhuti, and that is described in the chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, so that you can all read. Then you have Amsha and Avesha. Amsha and Avesha are also forms of the Lord that comes down, but they are they're temporally related. Amsha is there for some time, Avesha is there for a smaller duration of time. So those are all the differences. Amsha and Avesha. Balarama, Suresh, as you know, there are different views on this. Some schools believe that Balarama has an Amsha of Vishnu or Krishna. Others believe that Balarama is an incarnation of Vishnu himself. So there are different views on that. So I think you're right in that you captured the spirit that there cannot be any difference in the various forms of the Lord. Okay, this is something I want to stress, because in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, if you go to the very first mantra, that is what it is saying. It says Purnam Adaha, Purnam Idam, Purnat, Purnam Udachyate, Purnasya Purnam Adaya, Purnameva Avashishyate. Okay, this is the real meaning of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Purnam Adaha, Adaha means that. Purnam Adaha, that is infinite. Purnam Idaha, this is infinite. What is this? So what is this? This is avatara forms. So Purnam Adaha, that is infinite. Purnam Idaha, Idam, Purnaha, this avatara forms also infinite. Purnat, Purnam Udachyate. From that Mula Rupa form which is infinite, the avatara form which is infinite comes. Then Purnasya, Purnam, Adaya, Purnameva Avashishyate, which means that, and then it eventually, the Purnasya Purnam Adaya means the avatara forms, the infinite, avatara forms which are infinite, they go back to the Mula Rupa which is infinite, and what remains? Infinite only remains. Yeah. So this is the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashya that Madhva would give. This is the definition. Why Purnamadaha Purnamidam is to distinguish between, is to talk about this Mula Rupa and Avatara Rupa. Both of them are infinite, and there can be no difference between them. It is only for mundane people like us how we understand this. It is how we understand this that we sort of comprehend it that way, but actually there is no difference. Look at Aitareya. Sarveshu bhuteshu etameva brahma iti achakshate. Okay, this is a very important statement of Aitareya. It says Sarveshu bhuteshu. Last week we said this universe is not the only universe that he has created. There are multiverses. There are infinite universes that come from the Supreme's body spontaneously. So they are all the bhuteshu. And in that also, every form of the Supreme that is there in the infinite universe are exactly the same. There is no difference. Okay? Matsya Purana will say, Eka Rupaha Paro Vishnu Sarvatra api na samshayaha. Everywhere it is the same Vishnu's Rupa that is there. There is no difference. There can be no doubt about this. Now, of course, Brahmasutra is the Supreme Court verdict on this. What does Vedavyasa says? There is a particular verse in the 3rd Adhyaya, 2nd Pada, 11th Sutra. Na sthanatopi parasya ubayalingam sarvatrahi. Okay. Read about that particular sutra where Vedavyasa clearly establishes that in whichever sthana means place, that the Supreme is, there is no difference whatsoever in his Mula Rupa, his Avatara Rupa, his Amshas, Avesha, Vibhuti, and inside the Jivas as Paramatma, there is no difference. Yeah. Vishnu, you can call him Vishnu, is the name to indicate his attributes. Yeah. Katha Upanishad, and I put a warning signal there for us. Katha Upanishad very clearly says, Yad eva iham tad amutra, yad amutra tad anviha, mrutyosa mrutyum apnoti, ya iha na ane pashyati. Manasaiva idam aptavyam nehananasti kinchana. Mrutyosa mrutyum gacchati, ya iha naneva pashyati. Okay, you will all be very familiar with nehananasti kinchana, that has been plucked from this Katha Upanishad, and a particular philosophy has been propagated around that. But see where this nehananasti kinchana actually comes. It comes in that context of discussion about avatara rupas and mula rupas, okay, of the Supreme in Katha Upanishad. So this Yama is very clearly telling Nachiketa here that whoever thinks that the Mula Rupa is different from the Avatara Rupa will go to the deepest of hells. Mrutyosa mrutyum apnoti, ya iha naneva pashyati. Second line. I think we need to be very, very cautious when we understand these avatars and so on. We should not make any difference. That is the direction from Katha Upanishad. What does then the nehananasti kinchana means? What actually it means is, he who thinks that the attributes of the Lord is different from the Lord himself will also go to the deepest of hells. There is not an iota of difference between the attributes of the Lord and the Lord himself. That is his uniqueness. Yeah. So that is what his nehananasti kinchana means. Then the Upanishad goes on, says, he who thinks like this, that his attributes are different from him, you know what happens to him? And it gives a nice metaphor there. It says the last two words, Yad udakam durge vrishtam paravateshu vidavati evam dharman prutak pashyat taneva anu vidavati. That means he who thinks that the attributes are different from the Supreme, you know what happens to him? If there is a rainfall in a mountain, what happens? There is rainfall and water flows down the mountain from all direction and it gushes down to the bottom with great force. And Yama is saying, he who thinks that the attributes of the Lord is different from the Lord himself, he falls down instantly like that rain. He falls down very badly. So Kataka Upanishad should be our refuge in this, that we should be very careful when we make irresponsible statements about Avatara Rupa, Mula Rupa, Amsa, Avesha, and Vibhuti. So I hope this was useful, because that is the first type of creation that the Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about. Trisargo Mrisha, the first one is the creation of the multiple forms of the Supreme Brahman himself. So if there are no questions in this slide, we can move on to the next slide, Chitra. So now we are all familiar with this concept of this Brahman guy now creates matter and jivas. Okay. Now how does he create matter and jivas? And there are lots of Upanishads that you can read about, but the most important Upanishad that captures how and what and when and why of Brahman creating the universe is in Mundaka Upanishad. Yeah, and we have discussed this before. It gives 3 examples, which are beautiful metaphors. Yata urnanabihi srujate gruhnate cha, yata pruthivyam oshadayaha sambhavati, yata sataha purushat keshalomani, tata aksharat sambhavati iha vishwam. So the first one, I put a spider and the web. Yata urnanabihi srujate gruhnate cha. Urnanabi means spider in Sanskrit. So how does the spider create its web? It puts this web from its abdomen, and then it retracts it back. Similarly, this Vishnu guy, this Brahman guy, puts the universe forwards and then he retracts it back. What a beautiful example here. I haven't found a better example anywhere that describes how the Supreme creates the universe. Now, yata pruthivyam oshadayaha sambhavati. So I put that here, bringing jivas into creation. How does that work? The Mundaka Upanishad takes each seed as a jiva and then he creates. We'll come to that in subsequent slides. Yata sataha purushat keshalomani. How the hair comes spontaneously from the body, similarly this creation comes about, which is very similar to what we discussed in Taittareya Upanishad, Kohye vanyat kaha pranyat yadesha akashaha anandonyasyat. So it is a spontaneous act. So that is exactly what this says. Okay. So again here note the word aksharam. The third line of Mundaka Upanishad 1.7. Tata aksharat sambhavati iha vishwam. This Mundaka Upanishad. So there the word akshara is used for Brahman. Previously we had Brahman, then we had Satyam, then we had Akashaha. Now the word Akshara comes in Mundaka Upanishad, and again our great Badarayana settles all this and says Akshara means what? There is another sutra called Aksharamam Ambaranta Dhritehe. That is in different contexts, and he says that Aksharam is supreme. So if you do that application here, that Aksharam is supreme. And again, Akshara, as we said in etymologically, which is very similar to Brahma. Last week we said Brahma means so many things. It could be Jivas, it could mean Mukti Jivas, it could mean Chaturmukha Brahma, it could mean Lakshmi, it could mean Vishnu. Similarly, Akshara can mean Mukti Jivas, it can mean Lakshmi, it can mean the Supreme Being. Okay. That same Akshara, Ashnute iti Akshara, Aksharaha, Akshara, Akshara, we can split it in so many ways. But we don't have time to go through this. Essentially, it means he is Jnananandamaya. So the same Krishna who is Anandamaya is the same as Akshara who is Jnananandamaya. He is the same as Akasha who is Jnananandamaya. He is the same as Brahman. So that is a constant concept that comes in. So Tata Aksharat Sambhavati Iha Vishwam. If anybody is interested to know about who that Akshara is, what is the definition of Akshara, please go to chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, verse 16 and 17 that discusses this in great detail. So these are the metaphors that are given in Mundaka Upanishad. So moving on to the next slide. Now that creation, as I said, Brahman creation creates matter. How? Like a spider doing the cobweb. And I have put that force, Ajasya Nabhava Avadyekam Arpitam Yasmin Vishwani Bhuvanani Tastuhu. The beautiful Vishwakarma Sukta of Rigveda talks about that, how this from his navel, this lotus comes and Chaturmukha Brahma then creates this 14 worlds, the 14 petals of that lotus, indicating the 14 levels of universe. The upper levels, Bhuloka, Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Mahaloka, and Satyaloka. And the lower ones, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, Patala. So it talks about all this. And if you look at that spider and you look at this imagery, it fits in very nicely. So that those is, so our rishis are giving these so that we can remember how that creation would have happened. We have not seen it. All that we can do is we can only contemplate. Again in Gita chapter 14, here is a beautiful verse. Mama yonir mahat brahma taspin garbham dadami aham. Okay. First line, we should apply what we studied last week. Brahma. Here, what is the first line says? Mama yonihi mahat brahma. There that mahat brahma actually means Lakshmi. Yoni means, yoni is a very interesting word. There are three meanings for yoni. One meaning is yonir bharya. Bharya means wife. Yoni means wife. Yoni means stana. Yoni means the cause. There are so many meanings for yoni. So if you put that in, it's very clear that, so that is that from Lakshmi, he impregnates Lakshmi and then the creation starts, is the view there. So that is how the material world comes into being. Next slide. So now we are all very familiar with this, so I don't want to go through this because there are other lectures that we dealt with in great detail about all the 24 tattvas that then comes in. So the gist of this slide essentially is how that creation happens from Mula Prakriti to this Brahmanda that we know, this universe that we know. We have always said that this is a spontaneous act. And how does he do? He just glances. So akamayat bahusyam prajaye iti satapo atapyata satapa tapastaptva idam sarvam asrujata yadidam kinchat tat srishtva tadeva anupravishata tad anupravisha satcha tyacha abhavat. So he glances, material world happens, and then he goes into each part of his creation and he controls and maintains them. Chandogya Upanishad also says the same. Tad aikshata bahusyam prajayeti. Aikshata means that he looks at it. For us, if we have to bake a cake, we have to think so much and we get so many ingredients. For him, if he just thinks, he just looks at it, cake is done. Yeah, that is how his creation is. So moving to the next slide. Now the theories of material creation then becomes interesting, because the Upanishads and Vedas talk so much about creation, and every Upanishad that you say, there will be a section on creation that comes about. This is very important for Vedic rishis. They want to know about what creation is. So based on all the Upanishads, there are views that have come about. You can do your self-study, but I've just put it here. So there are three views. The first view is called Vivarta. Vivarta is the theory of material creation as per Advaita Vedanta, which is that you have this Brahman, then there is a superimposition of something called Avidya, and the superimposition then transforms into the material world. So that is Vivarta, means superimposition, literally. So that is the Advaita view of creation, where Brahman actually does not have an active participation in the creation of the universe. He plays an ancillary role, and the Maya or the Avidya is the one that does the creation. Whereas if you go to Vishishta Advaita and Dvaita, there's a slightly different view. So there I have put this guy who's sitting there. There is a clod of mud, which is the Mula Prakriti, and then he was using this wheel, and this potter is putting the clod of clay and he is creating. He is spending a lot of time creating various pots, and that is a view of creation. So that Brahman or Vishnu is that chap who is sitting there, and the mud is the Mula Prakriti, and he is creating jadas, and he is also creating, and I have labeled them for your benefit. Now, both these schools believe that everything is real here. In this three equation, Brahman, the Jiva, and the material body, and the matter, they're all real guys. The Vishishtadvaita view is Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karana, which means that a portion of the Brahman transforms to the universe. Yeah, and that Jiva and the material universe become the body of Brahman, and Brahman is the soul of this and controls the universe. So that's an amazing concept of how to visualize the Supreme and how he controls. In the Dvaita view, there is something called Nimitta Karana, where all these three things are there, they are real, they are eternally present. This guy, the Brahman, is only an efficient cause of the creation. He is not the material cause. So that is the Dvaita view. So you can see there is a spectrum of view on creation within our Vedanta Darshana, and you can do your individual studies, and it's a very fruitful place for various discussions and debates. Moving on to the next slide. So for the souls, and we have done this so many times, for the souls, ita pruthivyam oshadaya sambhavati. So we need to remind ourselves, each seed is a soul. All that the Supreme Being has done is he doesn't create any souls. So Chitra, if you want to scroll up a little bit so that I can see the top end of the slide. So all the souls, we know they are eternal. They are uncreated in Vedanta philosophy. Nityo Nityanam, Chetanas Chetananam. And then, of course, the famous Gita number 212, Tatvevaham Jatunasam, etc. They all establish that the souls are eternal. Souls are subatomic. Shvetashvatara Upanishad tells that. Souls are infinite. Vatsashruti tells us that. Souls are everywhere. Skanda Purana tells us. So what is then the purpose of this Supreme Brahman? All that he does is he is the gardener. That is the view of the Vedanta, that he is the gardener of the jivas. So he puts the seed inside the soil, which is the material universe, and this gardener puts manure and water and everything and nourishes the seed to grow into whatever it is. A neem seed can only become a neem tree. A mango seed only becomes a mango tree. They cannot change themselves. So that is a view of Vedanta, where the souls are eternal. They have their own attributes. All that the Supreme Being does is allows them to do their activities and mature into whatever their destination is. Now the bigger question is, how does the jiva get attached to the body? And again, we have dealt this. I think this is 5 months ago. The lecture is there in the YouTube channel. where we said that the Jiva has got 15 kalas, the fences, and Lakshmi actually ties them to these Jivas, to this material world. But it is the Vishnu who is 18 who releases them, and we have discussed these concepts, so read about that. But essentially to say that Brahman is also a creator for the Jivas in the sense that he attaches them to their material bodies, provides them all these situations and environment so that they can reach their full potential. So that is the creation for Jivas. Now moving on to the next slide. I'm keeping an eye on time, so we do have time. So now that is the view of Jivas, bringing Jivas into creation. So now again, I want to give you Vedanta Darshana and allow you to make your own research and understanding. So we have those birds, they're back again. You have Brahman, you have Jiva, and you have the Prakriti, which is all the tree in which they are. So go to the right hand side. As I said, Prakriti and Jiva, they are different. And in Visishta Dvaita, Prakriti and Jiva become the body of Brahman, and in Dvaita, Prakriti and Jiva are different and they are eternally dependent on the Brahman. Okay. Now move to the left. Now you have this concept of avidya, maya, upadhi. They all mean one and the same. So there is only one Brahman who is there. This guy somehow has this avidya over him, and the material world come about. And somehow Maya comes over, and then when Maya comes on it, this guy becomes what is called Saguna Brahman. And then when Upadhi comes, he becomes Jivas. Okay, and that is how the Advaita Vedanta evolves, and then goes back to say that this Jiva is actually Brahman, but it appears that they are different because of this Maya, Upadhi, Avidya concept. So you can do your individual studies and see which appeals to you. From where I am sitting, all three concepts are fascinating views of our philosophers of Vedanta, and they have their pros and cons, and we can make our studies and come up to a decision as to what appeals to us. Moving on to the next slide. So then, talking about this creation, we are talking about this Janmadhyasya Yataha. Let's not forget it. We're not getting digressed here. We are still in that concept of creation. Again, Mandukya Upanishad actually gives us, in all the philosophies of Vedic philosophy, there are four views, and there are three reasons for creation. Creation can be transformation, it can be illusion, or it could be a spontaneous act, or it can be Icha Matram, or the Icha of the Supreme. So those are the four views of creation. Okay, and the reasons why he creates is, it could be that he wants to enjoy, or it is just a play for him, or it is his intrinsic nature to create. And we've discussed all this in the initial stages. So there are four views of creation, there are three reasons of creation, but this Upanishad firmly establishes that Icha Matram Prabho Srishti. Okay, it says this is his decision, and it's his Icha that he wants to bring this universe to creation. Who are we to ask? Okay. Now the question about why does he create, we spoke about this Chaturmukha Brahma's age, and he survives. The cosmic duration of time is so much, and we have to go through eternal cycles of suffering before we make our progress back to liberation, so on and so forth. It all sounds rather too complicated. If this fellow is omnipresent and omnipotent, why can't he just bring us all and then immediately give us moksha and then take us back to liberation, where he can have this constant communion and we can have his constant communion with him? Believe me, these are fundamental questions that are so available in Vedantic literature that we can go and do our own research as to why he brings us in, why does he have to put us in suffering and so on. Is God got something to gain from it? Is he not partial? Is he not if he is benevolent, why is he doing this? All these kind of questions of Catholicism that comes in. Vedavyasa effortlessly answers all these questions. We can deal with it at some time, but these are all the sutras that I have summarized here. But you can do studies. Na prayojanavatvat. There is no use for the Supreme for creation. He creates for our benefit, number one. Lokavatta Leela Kaivalyam. He creates this because it's a playful act and it's a spontaneous act. But he is not partial, he is not cruel. Why? Vaishamya naigranye nasapekshvatva tatahi darshayati om. There is this very important sutra that discusses why God is not partial and cruel when he brings this creation. Because we see so many diversities, rich, poor, black, white, gray, yellow, intelligent, dumb, all sorts of things that we are seeing. And there are so much inequalities in this world. If this guy is so, why is he brought all this? If you want answers to all that, please go to Veda Vyasa and look at that particular sutra. Moving on to the next slide, we are coming to the tail end of it. So then we have dealt. I just want to remind you about when we talk about creation, it means Rupatmaka Prapancha, that is the world of forms. This is this Brahmanda, and then the Namatmaka Prapancha, the world of names. So it's Rupatmaka and Namatmaka combined together forms this universe. If you want to know everything about the Rupatmaka Prapancha, Sri Bhagavatam talks about this so much, and we have spoken a lot about this. This is just a summary slide as to how there are 9 stages of creation that is described in Bhagavatam. That is the Rupatmaka Prapancha. And when we go to Namatmaka Prapancha, I just want to remind you of the 10th verse of Purusha Shukta that we have done. Tasmad Yagnat Sarvahutaha Richaha Samani Jagnire Chandamsi Jagnire Tasmad Yajus Tasmad Ajayata. So that talks about bringing the world of names and tying the names to each form. Then you get the whole universe that comes about. Yeah. Then next slide. Chitra. So the knowledge, next you might ask me, if I think about it, we have now done about 5 hours of discussion on the creatorship of the Lord. So why do we have to bother knowledge of a creatorship? Lord, he has created, so what big deal? We are here, we'll survive. Why do we make an effort to know about the creatorship of the Lord? That question comes. 13th chapter gives you an answer. 13th chapter of Gita, verse 24. Ya evam veti purusham prakritim cha gunaihi saha sarvata vartamano api nasabhuyo abhijayate. It says, he who knows this properly of creatorship, the threefold stuff in the existence, the eightfold dispensations of the universe and so on. He who knows this will find liberation and he will never come back again, is the statement from Krishna in chapter 13. So this must be important. Why? In Tattva Sankhyanam, Madhvacharya will say, Swatantram paratantram cha dvividam tattvamishyate swatantro Bhagavan Vishnuhu. So in all of existence, there are only 2 entities, the Swatantra and the Paratantra, which means the independent Brahman and the dependent everything else. Okay, that Swatantra, independent or self-dependent being is called Vishnu in the Vedas. So when we do this creatorship discussions and analysis, then we understand how small and minuscule we are in the grand scheme of the universe, and yet we have forgotten our dependence on the Supreme. Every component of what we are in existence is actually a favor that the Supreme has given to us, yet we don't behave in such a way that we are grateful to him. We are not doing that. We have forgotten, and because of that we are going through the cycles of samsara and suffering, which we all know, and we somehow need to rewind and go back. How do we do that? It comes to this again and again in Shastras, that we understand the supreme independence of God when we understand the creatorship as described in the Vedas, and we understand the dependence of jivas on him, and that we develop that relationship with him, is the key message of the Vedas and the Upanishads. So moving on to the final 2 slides, Chitra. So now we have discussed about Janmadhyasya, what, where, who, when, why, how, and all that. Of course, Shvetashvatara Upanishad was the very first question of that, and we have done this before. Kim Karanam Brahma? Kutasma Jata, Jivama Kema. So there are some wonderful philosophical discussion in Shvetashvatara Upanishad where these foundational questions are asked, and we have dealt with this before, but I've just put this here so that we can remind ourselves that when we do sutra contemplation, we should go back to Upanishads and Vedas, because that is what the sutra's purpose is, to give us an idea as to how we have to get things in context of all the Upanishads, Vedas, Puranas, and so on. So moving on to the final slide for today. So now, Now is the bigger question. I have been rattling and telling so many things today about this Upanishad say this, that says this, that this is the creatorship God, and so on and so forth. But there is a basic issue here. And Badarayana, he's a topmost scientist. He actually asks these questions for us, and he says, he takes up the question and answers that in the subsequent sutras. But how to know about the creatorship of God? What is the evidence? Where is the evidence that, number one, there is God exists? Where is the evidence that this fellow has done all these jobs for us? It's all one bunch of fiction that we are talking about. How do we establish what is the essence of the Vedic literature? What is the purpose of scriptures and so on? So the upcoming 3 sutras are extremely critical and important for us, and that will give us the foundation as to why we should give so much importance to the Prasthana Trayas, which is Gita Prasthana, Sutra Prasthana, and Upanishad Prasthana, and all the other Puranas also. So the Veda Vyasa says, if you want to know about creatorship of the God, the only means of knowing is not to go to the CERN laboratory and break open the atoms and know about elementary particle physics. No, that is not going to give you the answer, the ultimate answer. The ultimate answer for knowing about the origin of the universe is Shastra Yonitvat. You have to go back to revelatory scriptures. So that is the next sutra, which is so important, Shastra Yonitvat. And immediately he says, how do you understand the Shastras? And he says, Tattu Samanvayat. And then there is a big controversy that comes. You're saying that, but the Shastras, everything is fictional. Is some fellow who is sitting somewhere in the cave has just jotted down the stories. I don't approve this. Okay. For that, he says, Ikshatehe na ashabdam. And he defends that major argument that comes about the authenticity of scriptures, and Badarayana takes up that question and answers it for us. So hopefully in this coming weeks, we'll deal with these 3 key sutras: Shastra Yonitvat, Tattu Samanvayat, Ikshatehe na ashabdam. So on that note, I'll finish today. I think I took some extra time, but I think I was all right overall. So we'll stop there. Krishna Pranamastu. Any questions? Yeah, any questions, please?
Madhu, can I ask a question?
Sure.
In one of your slides, where you said the slide about different forms of Vishnu,
Yeah.
and the Rig Veda Rupam, whatever that shlok was,
Yeah.
Rupam.
Yeah.
And if all the avatars of Vishnu are the same,
Yeah.
and there are Ananta avatar, infinite is the word you used, isn't it?
Yeah.
He is with the jiva in every jiva.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. And in other lectures, you have said that we have a dependent free will on the Brahman. I mean, I know you covered it a little bit later on in the lecture, but it doesn't explain why there is so much. If he is perfect and if he is blissful, then why is there suffering? Because our will is dependent on him and he is in us. So it doesn't quite, sort of, the circle is not quite squared.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. It's a very important question, but believe me, this has been dealt squarely by all the 3 acharyas. Both Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and Madhvacharya, all 3 acharyas have dealt with this foundational question of the imperfections that we see and the inequality that we see around us, and how do we try and address that, and how do we then reconcile, if this guy is so good, then why is this happening? Yeah. So there are upcoming sutras that deal with this. So I'll take your feedback on board, Deval, because I think we need to do this session at some point to talk about why there is Vaishamya, the perception of Vaishamya and Naigrinya. So partiality and cruelty, why is it there? So we can talk about this. There are very many views on this. I don't think we can solve that equation. We can't square that circle in this Q&A, but I think we can discuss this as a separate session, which can be quite interactive.
Okay.
I think Madhu, can I also add a suggestion here? I mean, I think you need to remember the three gunas as well, and the permutation combination of all the three gunas. So I think they will play a role as well. And in one sense, God has to be seen as impartial. So you can't be giving only good only. It has to be a mixture of good and bad. And the soul sort of, takes the lead and sort of takes the knowledge and comes out of the bad or whatever the negatives actually. So I don't know whether it makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Sudesh. Yeah, thank you very much on that. There are several levels and depths to this, and I think you kind of started that discussion. Maybe is this the time to discuss about this next week? I don't know, but maybe at some point we'll come back to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, we need a feedback. I think Madhu feels whether this Badarayana Sutra is a bit more, like if you all feel it's a bit more high-funda compared to the Upanishads. Do you all feel it's a very higher plane? Just people say like, or whether are you happy to follow, able to follow it? And because one of the worry from Madhu is whether it's on a bit very much higher actually.
I mean, I can pitch it, but these are one of those. This is a body of text that pitching it to the right level is challenging, and it really depends on Shrotru and Vaktru.
I thought this is the highest text, Madhuji.
Yeah, it is the highest text, Sheilaji, and these philosophical concepts will come in, and for the novice it can be complicated. But I just thought that we have been doing this for 6 months, various concepts, so I can introduce this. But I am more than happy to take feedback and.
No. Is it better to go through Devalji's, question first, so that the understanding will be better afterwards? Is it okay?
Yeah.
I mean, is it?
No problem. Yes, I will do that next week, because this is there is a particular concept called Jiva Kartrutva Vada. Yeah. So this is about something called Jiva Kartrutva, the action of the soul that determines its nature. It goes to the root of the problem, Jiva Kartrutva Vada, and why the Supreme does not change what the Jiva does. It gives it the dependent free will for it to do whatever it wants, but the Supreme does not make a positive change, i.e., it could have decided to convert Duryodhana into Bhimasena, but he did not convert Duryodhana to Bhimasena. Duryodhana had to do his own stuff and go to Andhatamas. That was his destination. Why is that system like that? I think, maybe we pause. Next week, we can do Jiva Kartrutva Vada and then try and discuss about why there is inequality of the world. How does the Vedantic view addresses this? What is the Vedic view on this? Is it all due to karma? Is this an illusion? Or is this because of a particular intrinsic natures of souls? So those are the three views. So illusion, Advaita. Karma, based on their karma, Visishta Dvaita, and based on the intrinsic nature of the souls is Dvaita. So those are the three, in the same spectrum, the three views as to why this inequality and cruelty of the God doesn't come. How does the Vedanta explores that? So yeah, we can discuss that. Yeah. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
And will that sort of pause the? I mean, we can pick up the Brahmasutras where we left off. I mean, I don't know how this works. It's difficult to know, because, like, if I use an analogy of maths, in order to do algebra and geometry, you need to know your times table and addition and division. So I don't know how a guru would start you off in a study. So it's a question that you are putting to the students who know how to approach this, is my view.
Yeah. So we can deal with that sutra, Vaishame Nairgrane Nasapekshadva Tatahi Darshayati Om. So that's one sutra that actually there's a volumes of text written around that sutra. So we can do that. Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. Yeah, Suresh, yeah.
No, I was just wondering, the next sutra that you said you would be addressing is actually addresses the why of the sutras, right? I mean, why do we think it's authoritative? Why do we have to trust it? So if we address that and accept the premise that that is the sole and the authoritative information, then it might be easier to relate to what the sutra says, rather than at least I was thinking, is it putting the horse before the cart in trying to elicit a meaning of the sutra before establishing the authority of the sutra?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the authority, as you rightly pointed to, Suresh, comes from the Veda. So first we need to convince ourselves that the Vedas are authoritative, and there is no dispute on what the Vedas are telling us, which is revelatory. That is the Shastra. Shastra is the whole scheme of things, Vedas, the Gitas, the Puranas, and so on. So we can do that also. I mean, I see where you're coming from. Yeah. Okay. So I think there's lots of useful feedback. Can I say what I personally feel? My own feeling here is we did 2 sutras. The next 3 sutras are foundational for us to perceive and approach the Vedas. If we need a good spirit and the right spirit of appreciating the Vedas, then we need to have an understanding of the next 3 sutras. And what we can do is, once that is done, we will come back to Deval's question and also Sheilaji mentioning as to why is there inequality in the world. If this Supreme Being is omnipotent and omnipresent, he could have changed everything and he could have made everything good. Why is there evil in this world and why is there inequality in the world is a big question in theology and philosophy. And maybe we can deal with this once we have got these 3 sutras behind us. Then the Panchadikarini, as we call it, the 5 big adhikaranas of Brahmasutra is behind us. And then we can do that topic, and then we can discuss, guys, do we really need to carry on with Brahmasutra, or we want to change angle and do something else, or we can get others to start contributing to Sunday sessions. So we can have all those 3.
I'm happy with the Brahmasutra, Madhuji. But just because she raised a question, doubt, because I was,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we will certainly take that on board.
No.
Thanks, Deval.
No. Madhu. And I think one of the thing is maybe we could go with question-based sessions every week, in the future, whether you do it now from next week or whether you do it after these 3 finished, of the total, the 5 of the Vedantasutra initial chapters finished. Because in that way, it could make it more interesting, and it could also, with our idea of creating this YouTube channel, some of these can be the questions which commonly asked, and these sessions could cover that, so that it's easier in that sense as well. And even during the sessions, you can quote from all the Upanishads, Vedantasutra and everything. So I don't know whether we go through that model. Maybe if you do one session for, whenever it is, to answer this question, and then we can see if that works out, then we could all come out with questions, which everybody asks from all the generations. And then sort of we can use those questions, in the process of answering it, we can cover many topics. So I don't know whether that is something which people will like.
Yeah, so I think the one unanimous question that's come about is, why is there evil and inequality of the world if this guy is so benevolent? Yeah, so that topic is an important topic. So maybe we'll do it. We'll certainly do it in the next, maybe not next session, but in the next 2 or 3 sessions we'll capture this. And my own feeling is, if you do the first 5, then that is the key crux of Brahmasutra. Without knowing those 5, I think moving to other sutras becomes complicated. So my own feeling, Sudarshan, is next week we can do the 3 sutras. Let's not spend too much time around the next 3 sutras. I think they'll get done in one session. And then we'll take up Deval's question about evil and inequality in the world. And then tie in Vedas, Upanishad, Sutra, Gita, and so on, and what they say. And so this is the view, whether we like it or we don't like it. So that's entirely up to us.
Okay, that's brilliant, Madhu. Any other questions? If not, we can finish today's session. Okay, give Madhu a big hand, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Madhu.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Madhu.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.